want to start off. I read this book this week. I just want to tell you about that. It's called The Days of Noah. It's a fictional novel, but and it's a Christian novel. Excellent book. Book 2's already out. I've already ordered that, so you can check this out when I'm done if you want to read the back. It was a very good novel. Highly recommend that. I believe it was Sophie Scholl who survived the Holocaust, or lived during the Holocaust, who said, you have to do what's right and stand up for what's right, even if you stand alone. And unfortunately, a lot of times people are alone when they're doing what's right. And today I'm going to teach on suffering, which is an extremely popular topic today in Christian circles. And in my opinion, and these are just the way I categorize things, I kind of categorize it into three types of suffering. We have general suffering from sin. We live in a fallen world that is corrupted by sin, and we live in fallen bodies that are corrupted by sin. And as a result of that, we have medical issues, health issues, stuff like that we have to deal with every day, aging, simple things of just for the fact that we no longer are in a glorious state like they were in the Garden of Eden. And there's really not a whole lot we're going to do about that besides become a believer, and then you're guaranteed to get a new body someday. But beyond that, we're kind of stuck with that one. So the second one I put in is self-inflicted. Now, self-inflicted could be put into two categories. There is positive self-inflicted suffering, like fasting. And during fasting, you're going to abstain from food and other luxury things, and this would keep your flesh in check and put some correction in your soul and some suffering onto your soul, but that is a good thing. A negative self-inflicting type of suffering would be what's called flagellation. There are types of religious beliefs that believe that if you physically abuse your body, you can atone for sins, or go to like a higher plane of righteousness or something like that. That would be a negative or inappropriate type of self-inflicted suffering. And then the one I'm going to focus on today is suffering that is inflicted upon you from somebody else. And the reason I am going to focus on that today is because it is something that is alien to us in America, more so than other countries. So the problem with suffering is that the Christian's natural response, usually to suffering, is a prayer of deliverance. Now, the first thing we want to do when something's going on with us is we want to get rid of it and go back to our comfortable lifestyle. It's a very natural reaction. I'm going to tell you that that's not always the best response. The reason I say that is because there are things that you can gain through persevering through suffering. That if you would pray for deliverance and God would deliver you from that, you do not get those benefits. So, Romans 8:16 through 8, we can read that real quick. So if you want to turn to Romans chapter 8. Everybody there? Romans 8, 16 through 18 says, "The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. So, I'm going to say what this verse says is that if you are saved, you become a child of God. Then you get to be an heir of God. That is guaranteed. There's nothing you can do about that. But I think the second half of that says that if you suffer, you can be joint heirs with Christ. So, because Jesus Christ was a child of God, he was God's son, and because he suffered, he got maybe an added part to an inheritance. And it says that you can be also a partaker of that if you suffer with Christ. The heirship of God is permanent. The heirship of Jesus Christ, there may be some added blessings that you can get through the suffering. And then Paul encourages you to take part in that, because as bad as the suffering is here, the blessings that you obtain from that cannot be counted. So, and today that's what we are going to focus on, is suffering. And like I said, why? Because in America, at least in my lifetime, when we've gone through a major blessing in America, most people act like they turn on the faucet and they don't get hot water. Well, what is going on? So, I want to say, though, that the reason I'm focusing on America today is mainly for two reasons. One, if I tell you that Christians are being persecuted in China or Russia or the Middle East, everybody knows that. If I tell you that it's coming to America, people have blinders on. The other reason I'm going to focus on America is for the obvious reason of that's where we live. If suffering is going on in Iraq and the Middle East, that's something we should be aware of. That's something we should try to help with. But that is not directly affecting us, and a lot of times it doesn't have the profound effect that it should have. So I'm going to have just a slight warning here and just say that we should be aware of certain elements of things that are going on in this country so that we can hopefully pray about that. Hopefully we can have a revival in America, and if not, then hopefully it doesn't blindside you per se. So the Pilgrims came over here in 1620. They came over from Europe because of persecution. The problem is they first went to Holland, and because Holland was so liberal, everything went. There was really no rules. And the Pilgrims didn't stay there very long because their children were being corrupted. They were no longer going to church and being as strict with their faith as they should have been. So that's why they came to America. And John Winthrop said that he wanted to set up America as a city on a hill, a Christian bastion to be a light shining to the world and a Christian nation. So how did we go from that to this? Oops, sorry. How do we go from that to this? This is Brittany McComb, and as she's talking about Jesus Christ and her faith as a valedictorian, the school goes up and unplugs her mic, because that is not acceptable in this country anymore in a public school. That is a telltale sign of where we're headed. So how did we get to that? What led us to this? To where people cannot praise Jesus for being smart in their gifts and getting a good education. I think it starts myself in Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar is given a dream. In this dream, he is given a vision of a statue. And Daniel interprets this statue for Nebuchadnezzar, and he says that it is these kingdoms. Okay, the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar. And then you go down to the Medo-Persian Empire, and then after that we had the Grecian Empire, and then they were taken over by the Roman Empire. And then I believe at the end, and this is kind of a traditional view, there's different views of this. I encourage you to study them all, look at them. I'm not super dogmatic on it. I like to look at some of that stuff. It is a little bit of a gray area. But we do have the Roman Empire that we know of, which was around when Jesus walked the earth. And then after that you go to the Holy Roman Empire, which a lot of people teach. And I do think there is a lot of validity to that. Especially because the statue has 10 toes, all right? Now, if we read in Revelation, the Antichrist has 10 kingdoms. It's not, that's significant. So Rome was in power at Christ's first coming. There was a lot of persecution going on then. So as we see this statue that was prophesied about clear back in the Old Testament, about at the end times there being a nation or a global empire of 10 nations headed by one world leader, you'll see this. Now this is a map put out by the United Nations, okay? This is an official map, and you'll notice that there are 10 regional groups. That should bother you. That shows us how close we are to the book of Revelation. This is an official map, and most of the time they put these out for economic purposes, economic sectors of these 10 region maps. So this has 10 regions on it, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but this is just going to show you that how close we are to these 10 kingdoms prophesied by Daniel. And we're going to go into back when Jesus was walking the earth, the Roman Empire was around. Okay, this is the same people that the Pilgrims were dealing with when they came to America. So Christians back then, during the Inquisition, has anybody ever studied the Inquisition? You need to study that. You need to study the Reformation. The apostles in the Bible were not strangers to extreme persecution, to extreme forced conversions. They lived during the reign of Nero. Nero was the Roman Empire, Roman emperor at the time. There was a fire in Rome that destroyed a lot of stuff. A lot of people died, and Nero decided to use the Christians as a scapegoat for that. And one of the things that he was known for was he would dip Christians in wax and then light them on fire. And he had gates. He had like a castle and a walkway up to his gates, and he would put those Christians in there and light them on fire at night alive. That would be his street lamps. So that's the kind of person we're talking about here. During the Inquisition, people were tortured. You can look this stuff up. For sake of time, I'm not going to go into it too much. But these guys were professionals, and they tended to focus their attention on specific parts of the body, which you can imagine, that would give extreme pain and discomfort, all for mock conversions or confessing something they didn't do. A lot of times they put people in a rack, and what the rack would do is they would tie ropes to your body and pull it at a joint. And then after they dislocated half your body, what they would do is they'd put you back in your cell, and then they would have a doctor come in and actually dress your wounds, reset your joints, heal your wounds. And then when you healed, they'd go do it again. So another thing they would do is if they couldn't pin something on you, well, they'd just go dig up one of your dead relatives, have a mock trial on that person, and then use that to confiscate your land and your possessions and say, well, your grandpa who's dead, he's a heretic, and we've tried him and found him guilty. Of course, he's not giving much testimony. And steal all their land and stuff like that. So all of this was carried out simply because They were worshiping Jesus Christ faithfully because they wouldn't bow down to an emperor. Okay? The Reformation happened big time when the printing press was invented by Gutenberg. And I hope you understand that how important your Bible is. Do you understand that people were tortured and murdered and killed so that you could own a copy of the Bible? Do you think about that, when we've got 100 other things to do? Or is that something you treasure and take time to respect that? Back during the Reformation stuff, it was illegal to own a Bible. They'd actually burn them. This is a woodcut of you can't read it, but down here it says that the Catholic Church is burning Bibles. If you haven't read the book 50 Years in the Church of Rome, I highly recommend that too. It's a book written by Charles Chiniquet. He was a French-Canadian priest in Canada, obviously, in the 1800s. And when he was a little boy, he had a Bible. And that's how he learned how to read and write, because they could only afford one book, very poor. And one day the local, the priest came calling at their house, just making his rounds. And he caught him reading the Bible. And he actually became very upset and told the father that he needs to burn that Bible. You're not allowed to own that. You shouldn't be reading that. Another trick they would do is they would keep the Bible, before the printing press, they would keep the Bible in Latin or something that nobody could actually read besides them. That way they could control what they were teaching and what they weren't teaching. So, is this stuff relevant today? That's what we got to ask ourselves. Is this ancient history? Is this medieval times? Or are all these same ideologies creeping into 21st century Earth in our time frame? So we're going to fast forward to Nazi Germany. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because this was the height of the Roman Empire. Hitler said he was creating the Holy Roman Empire. I'm also going to tie everything into Nazi Germany because nobody in their right mind is going to argue that Nazi Germany was evil. So we're going to use this as our ruler today. So just like the Inquisitors, just like the Reformation, the Nazis tortured people. They confiscated land. They forbade the reading of books. And as you can see here, they were Catholic. We got Joseph Goebbels here. We've got some Nazis, and these are cardinals from the Catholic Church. Now, slight disclaimer. I understand that there are good Catholic priests during World War II Nazi Germany that gave their lives to protect people. I understand that. But they did that outside of official Vatican doctrine. They acted on their own and were brave. A lot of people were. You could find a couple stories of Nazis who defied, Germany and did excellent things. So I'm not blanket, bashing anybody. I'm just saying that as a general rule, this is how things were going on. And to prove my point, I'm going to read a book called, it's called Woman Rides the Beast. Dave Hunt traces the history of the Roman Catholic Church. This is also an excellent book. It's very well done, very well researched. And I'm going to go to page 275 here. And this is talking about Hitler. It says, he had been raised in a traditional Catholic family, had regularly attended Mass, had served as an altar boy, had hoped one time to become a priest, and had attended school as a boy in the Benedictine monastery at Lambach. The abbot was heavily involved in the occult and Eastern mysticism at that point. And as a side note, all Catholic priests are encouraged to be obviously very well read and studied in Catholicism, but they're also encouraged to be very well read and studied in one other religion. So a Catholic priest would be like a priest and also a Buddhist monk or something else. They always have a dual thing there. So this guy was into Eastern mysticism and the occult, and it was in this monastery that Hitler first encountered the swastika. Going on with Himmler. Himmler's Catholicism was very important to him. He attended church regularly, took communion, confessed and prayed. Himmler's December 15th, 1919 entry into his diary read, "Come what may, I shall always love God, shall pray to him, shall remain faithful to the Catholic Church, and shall defend it." The SS Colonel Rudolf Hess, who was a commandant of Auschwitz and one of the greatest mass murderers in modern history, he was also raised in a devoutly Catholic family that hoped to see him become a priest. And it says the SS in many respects was patterned after the Jesuit order, which Himmler had studied and admired. So, and then on 278, Adolf Hitler, here's a quote from Adolf Hitler where he says, "Above all, I have learned from the Jesuits, and so did Lenin too, as far as I recall. The world has never known anything quite so splendid as the hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. There were quite a few things I simply appropriated from the Jesuits for the use of the party." And on 280 here it says, "Hitler insisted to the very end, I am now as before a Catholic and will always remain so. He was convinced that the plan he had convinced as a good Catholic would complete the massacre of those Christ killers," which would be the Jews, "which the Catholic Church had begun during the Middle Ages, but had executed poorly." So we got done talking about the Middle Ages, of the torture that was going on, of the forced conversions and the genocide. And Hitler knew about that history, and he said, "I'm just doing what they've been doing the whole time, just more effectively." So in Germany, the Vatican promoted Hitler. The Pope had a concordat with him, which is a peace treaty, which they never annulled. They never excommunicated Hitler or any of these guys. It's not that they don't do excommunications. They do it all the time, but they never did it with these guys, so that should raise some questions. Also, if you have time, as a side note, to look at the Vatican rat lines. There's a lot of good books on that, where inside the Vatican they actually provided false documents to known Nazis to help them escape to South America, mainly Argentina. So the main point I'm trying to tie here is not necessarily that the Catholic Church is Nazis, but that they are both socialists. That is the tie that binds, is extreme, unadulterated socialism. Okay? That's what the Nazis were. Nazi is an acronym, and it stands for the National Socialist Workers' Party. So they were openly socialist. And from that, from Hitler, we get the Muslim Brotherhood. Hitler brought to power the Grand Mufti. He did this is the Grand Mufti, this Hitler, they were partners. This is where you get this extreme hatred of the Jews in the Middle East. It was directly from Hitler. He brought this guy to power, and the reason he did that was because they wanted Jerusalem. They wanted to take over all this stuff. So instead of Hitler doing it because he was stretching himself too thin, he said, well, I'll just give these guys money and guns and bring them up, and they'll do it for me. So this is a modern-day picture of the Muslim Brotherhood, and does this look familiar? This is the Sieg Heil, or the Nazi salute. Okay, you're not going to see this on Fox News, but it's not hard to find on the internet. So the Muslim Brotherhood today, which anybody knows is evil and socialist, they were brought to power through the Nazis. Okay, now I'm going to switch over here and read Revelation 20, verse 4. So if you want to follow me on that. And we're going to read, let me know when you're there, say amen. It says, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, And judgment was given unto them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for witness of Jesus, for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Amen to that. But I don't know about you, but in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, nobody beheaded anybody. And I used to read this in Revelation, and I was thinking, what is going on? That's happening today on a scary, regular basis. In the 80s, I never read about this. Granted, I was a kid, so I wasn't watching the news too much. But I thought to myself, man, I did that 500 years ago. Nobody does that today. Yes, they do. These people are being beheaded for the witness of Jesus Christ. They're doing that because these people, these people were all brought to power through socialist Nazi Germany. And this is the fruit of that. This should be a warning. So, we know that the Nazis are evil. And we also know that the Muslim Brotherhood is evil. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to research and see if this has affected America at all. Through this time frame, I know we won the war in World War II. Did any of this ideology bleed over to America? So, here we have, you can see this little boy's face here, how terrified he is. Here's a Nazi soldier, and what he is doing here is checking to see if the boy is circumcised, see if he's Jewish or not. Now, this boy hasn't done anything wrong, besides being Jewish. Do we think that that is appropriate behavior for a government official to stop somebody and violate them in this matter? Somebody who has not committed a crime? Somebody who has not done anything wrong? I don't. But the TSA doesn't. They think that's perfectly fine. Now, we have different excuses of why we're doing this, different reasons to justify it. But this kid just wants to travel in America. He just wants to go he's not even leaving the country. And to me, that's a violation of his personal space and rights, So, also, the Nazis would intimidate people by controlling commerce. That's a good way to get people to fall in line if you control their livelihood, control how they make a living, control how they feed their kids. There's a story called Stalin's Chicken. I don't know if you ever heard that, but Russia's very cold, and Stalin had a chicken running around, and he was trying to explain the way he did things to people. So he grabs that chicken by the throat, and he plucks out all the feathers. Okay, and the thing's kicking and screaming and going nuts. And as soon as he's done plucking out the feathers, he sets it down. And it doesn't take very long for that chicken to come to him so he can hold it to keep it warm. And the moral of the story is this chicken, he says, you take away everything from these people, and they will willingly come to you for livelihood. They will willingly come to you for safety and whatever, because they can't defend themselves, they can't protect themselves, they can't feed themselves. So that's the ploy that takes place. So in Nazi Germany, they would mark stores with a Star of David in yellow, and they went for outright intimidation. Playing a soldier in front of the store to intimidate anybody from going in there to stop them. And then we see in Revelation 24, which we just read with the mark of the beast, that's one of the things in the end times will be a control of commerce. And also as a side note, during the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church put people in ghettos before Hitler, and they actually had them wear yellow hats to identify them as Jews. That's pretty similar. The yellow Star of David they were forced to wear. Same identifier, just a little modified. So, in America, we don't have soldiers in front of our stores forcing us to not go to a store or whatever. We've kind of taken the opposite side of the coin, and what we do is basically say, if you don't think like we think and agree with what we agree with, then we will run you out of business. This is in America. This guy here wants to serve Jesus Christ. He makes cakes for a living. Nothing wrong with that. But if he doesn't make gay wedding cakes, our government will fine him out of business. Sweet Cakes Bakery was fined $150,000 for refusing to make a cake because it violated his beliefs, which are supposed to be protected by the First Amendment. So why is this okay? Why is it all right? I mean, I understand it's not exactly the same as what we saw over in Germany, but it's the same principle. We will destroy your livelihood if you don't agree. And there's a lot of factories and stuff around here that are doing this now. You're going to sensitivity training, and you will learn to think this way, and if you do not, you will be fired. In Macy's, there was a guy who stopped a cross-dressing man from going into the women's change room. He was fired. That blows my mind that this happens in America. So we have to be re-educated to accept homosexuality if you want to own your own business, and pretty soon just to go to a job if things don't change. You shouldn't have to choose between your faith and feeding your family, especially when you're not committing a crime. Baking a cake is not committing a crime. You know, if this guy would have attacked these homosexuals or there was violence involved, that's fine. But just saying, hey, I can't bake a cake, that's perfectly acceptable in my eyes. So we have control through commerce, and that's what welfare is. It's not helping people. It's a socialistic idea of keeping people under control, keeping them dependent on the government. And that falls into eugenics, which is what the Nazis were doing. Eugenics is deciding who can and who can't breed, stuff like that, to adapt who you want to have born and who you don't. We see that in welfare. We see it with abortion. Most people don't understand that before we had abortion clinics after 1973, in the early 1900s, if you wanted welfare, they had sterilization clinics. Little girls as young as 10 years old, if mommy wants a welfare check, you get your tubes tied. Everywhere in America. Most people do not know that. I encourage you to look that up. Now we've turned it into some kind of feminist women's right issue to murder people, which I don't agree with. Over 3,000 kids are aborted every day in America. Every single day. That's just America. That's not talking about China or anywhere else. Just in America, 3,000 kids a day on average. That's a kid every 30 seconds. A child is killed in this country legally and government sanctioned. They don't just approve it, they promote it, and they support it with tax money to make sure that it thrives. Every 30 seconds. Now, if you follow a group called AHA, which stands for Abolish Human Abortion, very good Christian group, what they do is they go out and go to college campuses or schools or just street corners, and they put up signs and they say abortion is wrong, it's murder, and Jesus Christ loves you and he will forgive you for this. And you know, they spread the gospel and they say murdering kids is wrong. Now, in my opinion, in a Christian nation, they should have support for that. They very rarely get it. If you get on their Facebook page, you will see people cussing at them, spitting at them, throwing food at them, sometimes almost violently attacking them for simply saying killing kids is wrong and Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. That is not met with opposition from the government. That is met from opposition from the culture in the average college campus. That is another red flag. That is something we should be concerned about. So, another thing also, when commerce comes into play, we need to understand that the first people Hitler started killing was in a thing called Operation T4. Now, Operation T4 in Nazi Germany was a thing about killing what Hitler called useless eaters. These were the elderly and the handicapped. These were people that were not working and producing for the state, and because they're not producing anything for us, we need to dispose of them. That's what's going on with Obamacare. I hope you know that. In Obamacare, we have what's the name for them is the name we call them is death panels, but that's not. There's some official name for them. But basically, all that is a panel of people, because once you accept socialized health care, then you become government property. They decide what to do with you and everything else because they're paying for you. So when you have death panels, what this is a group of people, and most of them aren't even doctors, they're economists, they're bean counters. What they're going to do is basically say, well, you're this old, you got this disease, blah, 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 blah. Is it worth the money to fix you or not? You're no longer a human. You no longer have intrinsic value as a human being. You're a number that produces for the state and puts money in the coffer, and if you don't, then they'll get rid of you. And they're not killing you, but they're refusing medical care. So, and there's a lot of people with cancer that have already been refused. I know for a fact that the government now is manipulating the requirements. You can read up on this for nursing homes and stuff, shrinking them, weeding some out, stuff like that. This has already taken place in America. So we get, and the first thing they use to push abortion is, well, they might not be perfect, they might be handicapped, we got to get rid of them. So you see this already in America through a little bit different guise of whether or not people are considered useless eaters. So another unknown, at least I think it's unknown, is here we see, everybody's familiar with the number tattooed on the Jews that were in the concentration camps. Most people don't understand that this number here, IBM, which is an American computer company, during World War II, Hitler had trouble being an effective killer. He wanted to do this. He thought he was serving God. But how do I do this effectively? So IBM comes in. They're called in. And they had at the time what's called an ACTA machine. And everybody's seen them. If you're older, you remember the little punch cards with the ACTA machine. It had the number of printouts and the little cards for them. That's what this number is. This is their ACTA machine number. Hitler contracted IBM. They knew what they were doing. They said, we're going to get rich off this. They come in, sold them ACTA machines, showed them how to do it, showed them how many people you could kill per day effectively, how many people you could squeeze in a train car effectively. But you have to have a tracking number to do this. You know what I mean? It's a way you track people is what this number was. Okay? So they tattooed them with this. It was an effective means at the time through technology. Well, nobody's forcing people to get tattoos today in America. But they give you a little bit different carrot to swallow, and that is your own tracking number, right there. Your social, talking about socialism, your social security card. Now, the carrot they give you is retirement. Don't you want to have retirement? Don't you want to quit when you're 65 and blah, blah, blah? Well, that was a farce from the beginning because at the time you couldn't even get Social Security until you were like 55. I know it's like 65 now or something, but at the time it was like 55. And by them crunching numbers, they figured the average male lifespan was like 51, so they weren't even counting anybody using it anyway. So the question you have to ask yourself is, and this is all voluntary, just so you know, you voluntarily take a Social Security number. They don't force it on you. Now, it's almost impossible to get out of it, but you can if you know the right forms to fill out and stuff. But do we ever ask ourselves, why do I need this from birth? Why does a child need a number from birth? They're not working. They're not putting money in the system. They're not doing anything. It's a tracking number. That's all it is. If you want a car, you better have a Social Security number. If you want a house, you better have a Social Security number. If you want a job, you better have a Social Security number because you're not going to get one without it. It's a way to voluntarily get you to track yourself with the guise of retirement someday that you don't have to save for. You can go buy the boat and the ATV and we'll protect you when you're later. It's a control through commerce. That's all it is. But the problem with all this, because we have light socialism in America, The problem with light socialism is it always moves into outright socialism. It always goes into forced control, not willing control. So, we saw in Germany, when they had extreme socialism, we saw concentration camps. These were people that weren't fit for service, or people they didn't like. I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I got a way to go. Sorry. So, in America, we also had social concentration camps. This is a picture from America. These are Japanese citizens that had done nothing wrong besides were born Japanese. They were born in America. They had citizenship. They were rounded up. So we saw earlier about Nazis burning books and Bibles and stuff that was, Hitler didn't burn TVs. He didn't burn radios. He burned books, because books are where the information's at. They want to control information. So we don't do that yet, but here's a pastor in California reading the Bible on a street corner. He gets arrested. All he was doing was reading his Bible on a street corner. Cops show up, handcuff him, haul him off. Thankfully, this guy was acquitted because there was enough outrage, enough, noise was made about it. So that is it's a telltale sign of where we're headed when you can't read a book in a public square without getting in trouble for that. So I'm going to go through this real quick. Another thing to control people is your youth. They want to control what's put in your kids' heads. That way they can control the future. Hitler said, if I control the kids, I control the future. Get them while they're young. That's why a lot of stuff's put in indoctrination. So just real quick here, I'll just go through this. This guy here is the future leader. He's a good Catholic boy doing the Hitler salute, and he was in the Hitler Youth, and later on become a Nazi. He grew up and was in the German military when he got older. He was on a thing called the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, and when he grew up to a thing called the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith is adjacent to the Vatican. Its previous title was the Office of the Inquisition. They changed it for PR purposes. And this boy right here grew up, and it's Pope Benedict. So everybody needs to understand that. I don't know if he's still doing the salute there. I just found that picture. But same person. This guy here, socialist, he grows up to run one of the biggest organizations on planet Earth. Hitler understood controlling kids. So we got the uniforms here and the horns and the Boy Scouts of America, and I understand that has been promoted as a Christian organization for a while, but this is all Boy Scouts of America stuff in the 30s. We have the Boy Scout handy book, we've got their ribbons, and we've got their membership coins. Swastika there. I'm not saying the Boy Scouts are Nazis. I'm saying that the people that run that were very watered down socialists, bleeding socialism into our children. Here we see this. What's this? Is the Boy Scout handy book. What's this kid doing here? In the 30s. That's what they're doing. But I'm going to tell you right now, he's not doing the Hitler salute. He's not. He's doing the Boy Scout salute. And the Boy Scout salute was adapted from a person named Francis Bellamy. Francis Bellamy was a guy who called himself a Christian socialist. I don't understand what that means, but that's what he called himself. He was a socialist. This was a guy that lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And Francis Bellamy also wrote something else. He wrote a magazine called The Youth's Companion, which was like a Boy Scout type thing and everything else. And he also wrote the Pledge of Allegiance. And he wrote the Pledge of Allegiance, and we see little boy, this is a public school. What are the kids doing? Right here's the American flag. This is the original Pledge of Allegiance, the socialist military salute. Now, this was changed after World War II for obvious reasons. It didn't look very good anymore when kids were doing this in school after the Nazi socialist program blew up in their face. So this was changed. So we can see this in early America, and then we see this. The socialist military salute, Mussolini did it, Hitler did it, the Muslim Brotherhood's doing it, and the Catholic Church was doing it back then. So these are similarities between socialism, what it provides, what it leads to, what's going to. And we have the blessing of an early warning by seeing what was going on in Europe. We should heed that warning, not ignore it. And real quick, I'll just go through this. You don't have to follow me. But in 2 Timothy 3, chapter 3, verse 12, it says, it is a faith, or 12 says, if we suffer, we shall also reign with him, Jesus. And if we deny him, he shall also deny us. And if we believe not, yet he abideth faithful, he cannot deny himself. Well, that's 2:12. And then if we go to... So we all must do persecution. We should not shy away from that. We shall reign with Jesus Christ if we do that. And then if I go to Hebrews 2, 9 through 11, it says, for it became him for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, this is talking about Jesus, and bringing many sons into glory to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. For both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren. So Jesus Christ was perfected through suffering. Okay? This is something that he did not shy away from, persecution. He did that for us. We may be asked to do this for him someday. And in Hebrews 11, 24, it says, by faith Moses, when he came to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. So most people talk about Moses, he had to flee because he killed an Egyptian guard, right? Now, I always thought, why is Moses getting in trouble for being an Egyptian guard? He's part of Pharaoh's court. He can probably kill anybody he wants to, right? The reason why is he renounced Pharaoh's daughter beforehand. When he did that, he was a slave. He wasn't forced out of Egypt before that. He quit. He said, I can no longer partake in this system that is persecuting people and killing people, and he willingly quit. And it was at that time he killed an Egyptian guard, and that's why he was held accountable for that. It was because he willingly did that. That's probably why God could use him. So we need to ask ourselves if we are going to stand bold and preach the truth of the gospel, or if we, like Moses, we need to be like Moses and not fear the wrath of the king of this world. And I'm going to close up here real quick. I'm trying to say real quick, sorry. With Acts, and I'll read this real quick. Acts 5:25, where it says, 25 through 29, where it says, Peter and the apostles were arrested for preaching the gospel of Christ. And it says, then came one and told them, saying, behold, the men whom ye put in prison are standing in the temple and teaching the people. Then went the captain with the officers and brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, did not we straitly command you that ye should not teach in this name, the name of Jesus Christ? And behold, ye have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring the man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. So thank you for your time. You're dismissed.